There's a pretty good chance that if you're either new or even an intermediate producer, that your plugins are actually distracting you. Here's just a really simple question. Have you done absolutely everything you can possibly do with your music before adding plugins, or are plugins the first thing you reach for? In other words, have you done everything you can to find better sounds, get better performances, better compositions, and better arrangements before adding plugins? And I'm not talking about sound libraries. I would consider those integral to the sound, but I'm talking about effects plugins. The truth is that your music should already sound awesome before you ever add effects like EQs, reverbs, delays, compressors, and all the other effects you can think of. Hear me again. Your music should already sound awesome. And if you don't believe me, let me show you one of my own productions that has hardly any effects on it and already sounds awesome.
Now my head is spinning and it's just the beginning, and now I can't stop singing the song inside my head. There's no use pretending the song it's a new ending, so I just might be spending my whole night in cloud nine. I close my eyes and it takes me to another world. I'm on cloud nine and I cannot get enough.
Yes, that is a pre-mixed track. Now, is mixing going to make it sound better? Obviously, yes. The answer is yes. Of course it is. I'm not an anti-mixing advocate. But can we agree that this production probably sounds better than most productions by home studio producers even after they've been mixed? I've given feedback on around 600 songs in the past year and a half in my Program Producer Accelerator, since we do weekly feedback sessions for my members. So I'm listening to productions by home studio producers every single week. And in most cases, the feedback I give is not mixing related. You hear that? Most of the feedback I give is not mixing related, it is producing related. It is related towards critiquing the arrangement, sound choice, song structure, songwriting, and performances. I actually made a whole video on this last week. It's pretty uncommon for me to give straight up mixing feedback because in almost every case, the help that most home studio producers need has very little to do with mixing, has everything to do with the music itself and the production involved. The more time you spend loading up plugins and tinkering around with the EQ and compression, trying to just get it just perfect, is probably actually a massive waste of time instead. I'm gonna give you another example of a track that has basically hardly any plugins on it. Just look at the tracks right here. You can see there are very few plugins loaded up, just using a bit of reverb and delay on the occasional track. And here's what this sounds like with just this. Again, this is sounding great. So you may be thinking, okay, Nathan, that's true, but why? Here's why. First off, I'm starting off with solid sounds. The sound choices are working very well together and the sounds are excellent, which is also why you hear me advocating getting sound libraries over effects plugins, because sounds are at the core of our music. They are the colors we have access to in the canvas of our musical imagination. Secondly, this is working because the arrangement is working. I'm allowing each instrument to exist where it should and not competing for space with other instruments, and what those instruments are doing are working to help each other and not fighting against each other. And third, I've placed the tracks where they need to be in terms of volume, and this is literally just the fader. I think producers do not understand how insanely powerful the fader is beyond your plugins. If you cannot get a great sounding production with just the fader, then you went wrong somewhere along the way, and using more plugins isn't gonna magically fix it. Most producers spend insane amounts of time tweaking and dabbling with plugins rather than focusing on the most important things. Most producers spend insane amounts of time tweaking and dabbling with plugins rather than focusing on the most important things, which are choosing great sounds, building great arrangements, and properly staging your tracks. If you do those three things at a very proficient level, then guess what? Your job just got 10 times easier because you did the things that will make the biggest impact on your mix. The reason I go off on this so hard is because I see how many producers are getting totally screwed up because they are focusing on things that do not actually move the needle the most. If you want professional quality music, then you have to focus on the things that actually move the needle the most, and becoming a pro at using EQ is not it. And listen, if you want to be a mixing engineer and that's all you want to be, then yes, you're gonna be spending all your time on that. I'm not talking to mixing engineers, I'm talking to producers, home studio producers. Yeah, you might also be your own mixing engineer, but the best engineers in the world are the first to tell producers that they gotta do their job right in order for the mix engineer to do their job right. Again, refer back to the tracks I showed you that had no plugins and they still sound great. I adhere to a philosophy of producing music that apparently isn't so common, but really should be, and actually in my opinion, it's a philosophy that the best producers agree with, but it's always the amateur and beginner producers who disagree because frankly, they don't know better. I don't mean this as a knock or as a smash on those people or on you if that's you, but when you are new at something, you really just don't know. And many people who are new at producing act like they know more than they do. The problem is that producers spend so much time researching plugins, buying plugins, then tinkering with those plugins that they stop focusing on being a better musician or being a better arranger or a better composer or a better creative. Know what things will make you better than more plugins? Learning some basic theory, learning some basic piano skills, actively listening to music you want to replicate, which is basically analyzing music you want to model after, setting a timer for an hour and trying to produce as much as humanly possible without using effects plugins. Spending an hour doing what I call sound exploration, where you spend an hour going through your sounds to find ones that you like and then spending time discovering new sounds in your libraries to then use in the future. Learning about drum grooves, practicing creating different grooves. There are so many things that you can do that will move the needle for you in your musical journey more than plugins. And look, I am not anti-plugins. Like, I want to be really clear about this. I use plugins, I own plugins, but what I am against is how obsessed people are over plugins and gear. Like, for real, people, the magic of music is not in a plugin. Plugins only have the power to accentuate the magic that is already there. I've said this before. I love utilizing reverbs and delays in such of my music, and I even make videos about this stuff. I have lots of YouTube shorts where I cover like little tips and tricks that I do with plugins. Again, I'm not against plugins, but time and time again, my students tell me that the things that have made the biggest difference in their own music is learning how to make better music through being a better producer and not trying to be a plugin expert. And if you're like, Nathan, how do I do this? Then you need to watch my workshop that I just made where I go through this. It's the production roadmap that I follow. It's a step-by-step approach on how I go about producing music from start to finish. You can see this was a DM I recently got about it. It's completely free. You can watch it right here or the link in the description. We'll see you soon.